We begin with breaking news tonight. An 18-year-old student has died after being shot in his Scarborough High School. This is a live look at David and Mary Thompson Collegiate near Midland and Lawrence. The TDSB says the shooting happened shortly after dismissal around 3 o'clock. Police say the male victim was a grade 12 student and that he was targeted. A search is on the way for the suspect.
The school was put into a lockdown. It was searched with the assistance of our emergency task force. We've had several members that were here earlier and still continue here as the investigation unfolds. I can tell you the crime scene is the entire main floor of that school.
The TDSB says it's working with police and will let families know if the school will be open tomorrow. TDSB spokesperson Sherry Schwartz-Mull says the school is in shock.
I've only been here for about a half an hour, but it doesn't take a lot to go inside and see a school that's visibly shaken and upset. And yes, we do lockdown training, and yes, we do hold and secure training. But in the end, when it happens, it's like nothing else. So that's why my heart is in my throat.
We'll, of course, continue to follow this story for you throughout the evening. You can get the latest on our website, cbc.ca/Toronto. Come March 1st, you'll no longer have to show proof of vaccination to enter businesses in Ontario unless they choose to require it. On Thursday, capacity restrictions are completely lifting in many public places. A few days earlier than originally planned, Ontario's Premier and top doctor announced the easing of pandemic health restrictions today. Angelina King now with the very latest.
And I stood at this very podium and promised you that these tools would only be used for as long as they were absolutely necessary, and not one day longer.
That day now coming earlier than planned. On Thursday, capacity restrictions are being completely lifted in many places, including bars, restaurants, gyms, and cinemas, and increasing to 50% at sports arenas and concert venues. Plus, proof of vaccination will be removed March 1st unless businesses choose to keep it.
It served its purpose. We have the level of protection that we need to remove public health measures and have made terrific strides on reducing the risk. Our health system is in much better position now.
The head of Ontario's COVID-19 Science Advisory Table says projections show in the next 2 to 3 weeks, hospitalizations and ICU numbers will be cut in half.
The decision today is supported by data.
Dr. Peter Uni says vaccine certificates won't make a big difference in reducing transmission.
We don't want just to maintain certificates to keep a virtual sense of security, which is not really supported by science.
The Premier went out of his way to say the decision to lift measures was driven by data and science.
Today's announcement is not because of what's happening in Ottawa or Windsor, but despite it.
But the NDP leader suggests it is about politics.
More about Doug Ford caving to the occupiers in Ottawa, more about him trying to be the good guy before the election.
And as restrictions ease,
we need to be responsible. We need to take it slow and not pretend the pandemic is over. Then, continue with getting third doses.
some measures will remain in place for now, including masking indoors and proof of vaccination for staff and visitors to long-term care homes. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
Small businesses are thrilled by the reopening news, but will customers come back in droves? Something that will take some time. Dale Manukduk looks at that angle.
This has been just brutal over the last 2 years with restrictions.
The president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says the majority of Ontario's small businesses are in favor of dropping capacity limits and proof of vaccination.
It is not going to be a tidal wave of customers coming back to small businesses. Just lifting restrictions alone is not going to be enough to turn the tides.
The CFIB says only 33% of Ontario's small businesses have returned to normal sales levels. Brazen Head and Black Sheep in Liberty Village is still down roughly 40% and short 20 employees they'd normally staff this time of year.
You talk to anybody in the industry, we've lost people everywhere. They've either, found another avenue or they just got tired of getting let go every 4 months. So it's really tough.
The Irish Bar says the announcement couldn't come at a better time with St. Patrick's Day and Toronto FC's season around the corner.
When that crowd is coming in, They're bringing a ton of revenue with them, obviously, and it's an atmosphere. This is a place you want to be when TFC is playing.
TFC's ownership, MLSE, can welcome 50% capacity for the Leafs game on Thursday and says they'll return to 100% on March 1st when the Raptors host the Brooklyn Nets. But they haven't decided what they'll do regarding vaccine passports. Callum Shaw opened his gym strong in September of 2019, 6 months before the pandemic began. He says his business is based on trust, relationships, and routine, and that each lockdown has cost the gym 30 to 40% of its clients.
A lot of those people will leave, and then as they get more comfortable with restrictions being lifted, we'll probably see 10 to 20% of those people return.
So just how comfortable are people, and will they come?
We've closed down too slowly and opened up too quickly. That seems to be the pattern.
I mean, great for businesses. It's a little bit scary thinking about the vaccine passport going away. We have been somewhat caged up by this whole experience and by necessity. But we have to get moving.
The CFIB wants to see a stay open plan from the province, including measures to reinforce the healthcare system to avoid further lockdowns. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Justin Trudeau has invoked the never-before-used Emergencies Act. The Prime Minister says it will be time-limited and targeted, and that it's meant to help restore order amid ongoing anti-mandate protests and border blockades. But as Ashley Burke reports, some premiers are not welcoming the move.
We cannot and will not allow illegal and dangerous activities to continue.
A historic moment, the first time the Emergencies Act has ever been invoked.
It is now clear that there are serious challenges to law enforcement's ability to effectively enforce the law.
It gives the federal government immediate sweeping powers to intervene. As politicians at all levels squabble over who has jurisdiction to act, and Ottawa police say they're overwhelmed. Hundreds of trucks continue to paralyze the downtown of a G7 capital for the third week straight, with no end in sight.
The situation requires additional tools not held by any other federal, provincial, or territorial law.
The act will be temporary and designated to critical areas, giving RCMP the power to issue municipal fines and make arrests.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
But the Conservatives say this isn't the solution. Ending COVID restrictions is.
Does the Prime Minister think that these protests constitute a threat to the security of Canada? And if not, does he think that with this news, he could be escalating rather than de-escalating an already inflamed situation?
It does not really matter whether certain members of the opposition have been merely irresponsible or recklessly complicit. But what this country is facing is a largely foreign-funded, targeted and coordinated attack on critical infrastructure and our democratic institutions.
The Liberals argue the blockades are an attempt to harm Canada. They have the NDP's support.
When our capital city is under siege and has been under siege for weeks, this is an emergency.
The Premier of the province most impacted by the demonstrations says he'll take whatever help he can get.
I'll support the federal government in any proposals they have to bring law and order back to our province, to make sure we stabilize our businesses and trade around the world.
But the premiers of Quebec, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta all say they don't need it and they don't want it.
We would very much prefer that it not be applied to Alberta. It's not needed.
The federal government also announced immediate changes to crack down on crowdfunding websites helping fund this movement, and also served notice to truckers that the insurance on their vehicles will be seized and corporate accounts frozen. But the Prime Minister said that one of the things he would not use the Emergencies Act to do is call in the military. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
The RCMP has seized guns and arrested 11 people at the protests in southern Alberta. Mounties say they confiscated long guns, handguns, ammunition, body armor, and a machete. Police say the small group within the protest appears to have been willing to use force against any attempts to break up the protest. Alberta's Premier says now that this security challenge has been resolved, the closure will no longer be tolerated. The demonstration has disrupted the Coutts border crossing for 2 weeks now. Traffic is once again moving across the Ambassador Bridge. Police broke up the protest at that border yesterday. Officers are maintaining a heavy presence to make sure the road doesn't get blocked again. Windsor's mayor says the 6-day-long closure cost the economy $3 billion. And another weekend anti-protest mandate here. Toronto police have begun to lift some road restrictions. This morning, they fully reopened Hospital Row on University Avenue. However, police say they are keeping roads around the legislature closed as a precaution. Law enforcement agencies across Canada have been alerted after a truck loaded with at least 2,000 guns was stolen over the weekend from a trucking yard in Peterborough.
So far, the investigation is leaning toward an isolated crime of opportunity rather than a targeted incident. It is believed that the suspects entered several other commercial yards in the city before this one, and they had attempted to take different trucks and trailers before leaving, with the truck and trailer units sought in this incident.
Police say the suspects were in a 4-door blue sedan. He has all firearms stolen with the truck were of small caliber, and no ammunition was in the trailer when the guns were taken. Law enforcement agencies across Canada are on the lookout for a 2019 Freightliner new Cascadia truck and 53 dry freight van trailer, 53-foot rather. Police add that the trucking company and the firearm manufacturer, Savage Arms, are fully cooperating with the investigation. Victims' families, survivors, and advocates say it's time Ontario toughen its penalties for drivers seriously injured or kill someone through dangerous driving. Too often, they say a driver who breaks the rules of the road walks away with just a fine at most. Farah Morelli explains.
He was a light in our lives, and we lost that.
Shona Siddiqui, remembering her younger brother Asim, a father, brother, son, and uncle. Siddiqui was struck and killed by a dump truck here. His family says he was walking in a crossing with the pedestrian signal on. The driver, who fled the scene, has now pleaded guilty to a charge under the Highway Traffic Act, a charge that has a fine as a penalty.
It's really frustrating. It feels like there are no consequences for somebody driving a vehicle like that.
That feeling of a lack of accountability, familiar to some who survive a crash.
It wasn't easy for me to reconcile that I was able to survive war and then almost killed in Toronto in a cycling accident.
Majid Zakut was hit by an uninsured truck driver making an illegal left turn. What followed were months of surgeries and rehabilitation, but the charges against the driver dropped.
This case has always stuck with me because our sort of one chance at justice was taken away.
His lawyer later learned he never received a subpoena.
So Mr. Zakut never showed up to court. The defendant did, and the prosecutor, despite having a signed statement that the driver was driving uninsured and had injured somebody, decided to toss the case on site.
Advocates are now pushing for tougher legislation.
In the vast majority of these cases, and we call it road violence because that's what it is, many of these drivers don't even get charged.
Lawyer and road safety advocate Patrick Brown is one of the architects of the Protecting Vulnerable Road Users Act, introduced as a private member's bill by NDP MPP Jessica Bell. It would bring in a mandatory license suspension until a course is completed in community service. The bill has passed a second reading, but remains in committee.
It's one piece that's closer to bringing change.
Part of that legislation would make reading a victim impact statement mandatory, something which Siddiqui hopes they can do.
It's important for me to address him directly and our family to address him and let him know that a small error on his part took away a life.
Farah Morelli, CBC News, Toronto.
A sunny but cold Valentine's Day in the GTA, Colette.
Yeah, for sure. And happy Valentine's Day, my
you
friend.
Too.
Yeah, certainly. And, you know, sometimes I hear people saying, oh, I'm looking for a new show. They're on their streaming services. They're looking for a drama. I'll tell you what, you just stay tuned to the weather this week and my forecast. And I've got all the drama I think most of us can take because we've got a lot of ups and downs and turns arounds, all things happening. So another cold night ahead tonight. So tomorrow morning's going to be a chilly start. That's one thing. But then midweek, our temperatures are going to really spike. But not only that, it's going to be accompanied by windy conditions. And along with that, possible flooding because of rain, and then turning into a messy mix as we go into Thursday. So you see what I'm saying here? And let's just illustrate that a little bit further in terms of average for daytime high -1. Well, today about -10. Tomorrow, we transition, -4. Then we're going to jump 12 degrees Wednesday to a daytime high of 8. And then Thursday, 6, but the temperature will be falling. And then another 12-degree. Yeah, that's going to be a drop as we go towards the end of the week. So these are the crazy conditions coming our way. Current temperatures look like this. The winds are going to spike in the overnight hours tonight. So there'll be times where it's going to be quite breezy and it's going to feel like -20 by tomorrow morning before those temperatures start to come up. Because of that, some lake effect starting to ramp up, and it means some flurries could make their way into the city in the overnight and the early morning hours. Otherwise, it's confined towards the snow belt as we go into Tuesday with variable skies. Then this system coming our way as we go into Wednesday. The beginning part of the day Wednesday, that's going to be one of your windows to get outside and enjoy some climbing temperatures, but windy. Then the wet weather comes in, starts as rain. But then I tell you, it does turn into a mix. So this is really going to be one to watch. And Dwight, that's again going to be Wednesday late in the day and then into Thursday with a whole lot going on and making for some nasty roadways and road conditions as well.
Yeah, that's going to be quite the change in a short period of time.
Absolutely. Crazy. Drama.
Thank you. The Ontario Finance Minister says the 2021-22 deficit will come in at just over $13 billion.
This is $8.4 billion lower than projected in Build Ontario in the fall economic statement.
Minister Bethlen Falvey says the province has also invested most of the $2.7 billion in COVID relief funding announced as part of the fall economic statement. He says the money has gone to hospitals, property tax and energy rebates for businesses, small business grants and long-term care homes. The former head of a North York charity is wanted by police in connection to allegations he misappropriated funds earmarked to help those in need. Northwood Neighborhood Services serves vulnerable seniors and refugees, but a former executive director allegedly used hundreds of thousands of dollars for a down payment on a condo and a new car. Samantha Beatty has this exclusive story.
At a snowy park near Northwood Neighborhood Services, these charity workers are raising the alarm. They say donors need to know hundreds of thousands of dollars were mishandled. Some is still missing.
We're fighting for this because we are angry, you know. We want justice.
Sharif says he was fired last month after asking management for an independent investigation, but isn't giving up. The problems at Northwood started in 2020. According to court documents, then Executive Director Francois Yabit convinced the board of directors to invest $290,000 in real estate. It's alleged he didn't disclose the money would be transferred to his company for his brother to buy a condo in Cambridge. Yabit also used over $54,000 to buy a Toyota 4Runner, claiming it was paid for by Second Harvest to deliver food. Second Harvest told CBC Toronto it never provided funding for a vehicle. Northwood staff say they couldn't believe what was happening.
This money is Canadians or citizens' hard-earned money, which is at risk because there are people signing checks left and right.
Then board chair Huma Tahir signed off on the spending. But once an accountant raised concerns, she fired Yabit and sued him on behalf of Northwood. In a statement to CBC News, Tahir says, if the board had knowledge about his malpractices, we would not have signed it off. Since then, Tahir has become executive director, and through a court order, the charity recovered the real estate investment. They have yet to recover $75,000, and Tahir says she reported that to police. Yabit did not answer CBC Toronto's questions, but his lawyer said the remaining issues will be settled soon. Police say they've issued a warrant for Yabit's arrest on a fraud charge and are encouraging him to turn himself in. Meanwhile, staff say Tahir refused to initiate a third-party investigation, and fed up, they reported the incidents to the Canada Revenue Agency, United Way, and City of Toronto last September.
Very, very discouraged, angry, and frustrated as well, because these events have been happening for more than 2 years now.
The city and United Way tell CBC News they're investigating and Northwood is cooperating. Alvarez says the entire situation has been an unwanted distraction.
and we were doing a great job. We have been very proud.
Samantha Beatty, CBC News, Toronto.